There's a particular kind of loneliness that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a dramatic event or a defining moment you can point to later and say, "That's where it started." It accumulates the way sediment does, layer by layer, year by year, until one day you look down and realize you're standing on something that wasn't there before, something dense and heavy and entirely invisible to everyone else in the room. I know this because I lived it for 35 years. And I know it because the first time anyone ever looked at me with genuine alarm, the first time someone said, with real urgency, that something was wrong, I was unconscious on the floor of a conference room and couldn't hear them. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 35 years old. I am, by most measurable standards, fine. I have a good job, operations director at a logistics firm in Columbus. I have an apartment I like, a small group of friends I've known since college, a gym membership I actually use. I sleep 7 hours a night and eat reasonably well and don't drink more than the occasional glass of wine on weekends. I am, in other words, exactly the kind of person who is not supposed to collapse during a Tuesday morning meeting about Q3 projections. And yet, I want to tell you the longer version of that story. Not because the collapse itself is interesting, but because of what came before it. A lifetime of decisions, small and large, that I made based on a single premise I had never once thought to question. The premise was this: I was the lucky one. My parents told me so, regularly, lovingly, with the particular warmth of people who genuinely believe they are giving you something good. And for 35 years, I believed them. My younger brother's name is Noah. He's 32 now, dark-haired, charming, quick to laugh, the kind of person who makes friends easily and keeps them. I love him. I want to be clear about that before I say anything else, because what I'm about to describe isn't his fault, and he spent most of our childhood unaware of the dynamic he was at the center of. Noah was sick when he was small. That's where the story begins, really. He was 18 months old when he developed a respiratory condition, serious enough at the time to require hospitalization, serious enough to genuinely frighten our parents. My father spent 3 days sleeping in a hospital chair. My mother barely left Noah's side. I was 4 years old and stayed with our aunt, and I remember being confused about where everyone had gone and when they were coming back. Noah recovered fully. The doctors said so. The condition resolved completely before he turned 3, and by the time he started kindergarten, there was no medical evidence it had ever existed. But something had changed in our house that didn't change back. My parents had seen Noah fragile. They had sat beside a hospital bed and watched machines monitor their younger child's breathing, and that image had lodged itself somewhere deep and permanent. It rewired something in them, not deliberately, not cruelly, the way these things usually happen. Organically, unconsciously, one small accommodation at a time. Noah was handled carefully after that. His complaints were taken seriously. His preferences were consulted. When he said he was tired, he was allowed to rest. When he said something hurt, someone checked. When he wanted something, the default answer was consideration rather than refusal. I was healthy, I was older. I was, my parents' phrase, offered always with a smile, the lucky one. I don't think I understood what those words meant the first few times they were said to me. I was 6, maybe 7, the first time I remember them clearly. I had wanted to go to a birthday party. A classmate from school, someone I liked, and my mother had said she was sorry, but Noah had a checkup that afternoon and she needed to be there with him. And could I be understanding, because I was the lucky one, the strong one, and she knew I could handle it. I said okay, because I could handle it, I was strong. At 8, I wanted new cleats for soccer. The other boys on my team had them. My father said money was tight that season. Noah needed speech therapy, and the sessions weren't fully covered by insurance. But I was the lucky one, the one who could manage, and hadn't I done fine last year with the old pair? I said yes, because I could manage. At 11, I had a pain in my chest that came and went for 3 weeks. I mentioned it once at dinner. My mother looked up, looked back down, asked if I'd been eating enough. Noah had had a bad week at school, some social difficulty with a group of boys, and the dinner conversation circled back to him, and my chest went unmentioned, and then the pain went away and I forgot about it. I was the lucky one. My pain was the kind that went away. Here is what I want to be careful about. I am not describing a household of cruelty. My parents were not cold people. My mother made my lunch every day until I was in 7th grade. My father came to my soccer games, most of them anyway, and stood on the sideline in his work coat because he'd come straight from the office. They told me they were proud of me. They hugged me. They meant it. But there is a particular exhaustion that comes from being loved in a way that is always slightly conditional on your not needing too much. I learned the rules early, and I learned them well. Don't ask for things that cost money when Noah's therapist bill is due. Don't get sick when Noah is already having a hard month. Don't need attention when the attention in the room has already found somewhere to go. Don't be a burden. The lucky ones aren't burdens. The lucky ones handle things. So I handled things. I handled my own homework and my own schedule, and eventually, my own college applications. A process my parents were broadly supportive of but not closely involved in. Because Noah's college search was more complicated, he needed more guidance. He struggled with the essays in a way I apparently didn't. I got into a good school. I worked part-time to cover what my scholarships didn't. I graduated in 4 years with no debt and a job offer, and my parents held a dinner for me and my father made a toast and said he'd always known I could do it. He seemed genuinely proud. And I want to be honest about this, I was also proud of myself, of the self-sufficiency I'd built. I had internalized the story my parents told about me so completely that I had made it true. I was capable. I was independent. I didn't need much. It felt like an achievement rather than a loss. That's the thing about being shaped by a belief from childhood. You don't experience it as shaping. You experience it as identity. My 30s arrived, and the shape of my life continued along the lines I'd established. I advanced at work faster than most people my age. I was good at operating under pressure, at solving problems without making them other people's problems, at staying functional in situations that caused my colleagues visible stress. My manager once said, in a complimentary way, that I seemed to have a higher threshold for difficulty than most people. I took it as a compliment. I didn't think about where that threshold had come from. Noah, in his late 20s, went through a difficult period. A relationship that ended badly, a job he hated, a stretch of months where he called our parents almost daily. My mother mentioned these calls often when she and I spoke. She seemed tired, slightly overwhelmed by the frequency of his need. I listened and offered what I could from a distance. Once, near the end of one of those calls, she said, "I don't know what we'd do without you being so steady, Ethan. You've always been the easy one." I said thank you. That was the right response. I didn't say that I had been having chest pain again for the past 2 months. Brief, intermittent, easy to explain away, stress, posture, the long hours I'd been working. I'd gotten good at explaining things away. The lucky ones don't catastrophize. The strong ones push through. So I pushed through. The meeting was about Q3 projections. 12 people in a conference room on the 4th floor. The kind of meeting that runs long and leaves everyone slightly depleted. I remember the slide on the screen, a bar graph, blue and gray, and someone's voice explaining a number I was supposed to have an opinion about. And then something that felt like a door closing. Not painful exactly, more like a sudden and complete subtraction of something that had been there a moment before. Light, sound, the particular hum of a room full of people. All of it present, and then not. I was on the floor when I came back. Someone's jacket under my head. A woman from accounting kneeling beside me with her hand on my arm, saying my name in a careful voice. 2 other people standing in the doorway, phones out. My first thought, lying on the carpet of a conference room I'd sat in 100 times, was, I hope this doesn't take long. I have a 3 o'clock. My second thought, arriving slowly, like something surfacing from deep water, was that I'd felt this coming for 2 months. I hadn't told anyone. Of course I hadn't. I was the lucky one, the strong one, the one who handles things. The ambulance arrived 11 minutes later, and I spent that time on the floor being careful not to inconvenience anyone more than I already had. The cardiologist's name was Dr. Reyes. She was somewhere in her mid-40s, efficient without being cold, with the particular manner of someone who delivers difficult information, often enough to have developed a method for it. She sat across from me in a chair she'd pulled close to the bed, rather than standing at the foot of it, which I noticed and appreciated without fully understanding why until later. She had my scans on a tablet. She walked me through them methodically, the structure of the heart, the specific anomaly, what it meant in clinical terms. I understood about 60% of what she said. I understood enough. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, congenital, the kind of thing that develops before birth, that is present from the beginning, that in most cases is identified in childhood through routine screening or in response to reported symptoms. This has probably been there your entire life, she said. Okay, I said. She looked at me for a moment, not unkindly, the way someone looks when they're trying to gauge how much you've understood. Mr. Miller, she said carefully, did you have a lot of cardiac screening as a child? Routine checkups, anything like that? I thought about it. Doctor's appointments I could remember. The usual childhood vaccinations. A visit once for a sprained wrist. A school physical in 7th grade that I'd attended alone, because my mother had been at a therapy appointment with Noah and had signed the permission form in advance. The standard things, I said. Nothing specific to my heart. She nodded slowly. She looked back at the tablet, then at me. Did you ever report symptoms? Chest pain, shortness of breath, fatigue that seemed disproportionate to what you were doing. The chest pain at 11. The same pain, returning in my 20s, lasting a week and then fading. The 2 months before the collapse when I'd been explaining it away with such practiced efficiency that I'd barely registered doing it. Once or twice, I said. When I was young, it went away. She held my gaze for a moment. This is very manageable, she said. I want to be clear about that. With medication and monitoring and some lifestyle adjustments, people live fully normal lives with this condition. You're going to be fine. A pause. But if it had been identified when you were a child, we could have been managing it for 25 years. Some of the stress on the heart muscle, she stopped. Started again more carefully. It would have been better to catch it earlier. I looked at the ceiling. Why did nobody bring you in when you were a child? She asked. Gently. Not an accusation, just a question she seemed genuinely uncertain about. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about a Tuesday evening when I was 11 years old, pain moving through my chest like weather, and a dinner table where the conversation had somewhere else to go. I was the healthy one, I said. She waited, in case I had more to say. I didn't. They kept me for 2 days. I didn't tell my parents the first day. I told myself this was because I didn't want to worry them unnecessarily, that I'd wait until I had clearer information to share. I told myself this and mostly believed it. The truth was something I wasn't ready to look at directly. The truth was that my first instinct, lying in a hospital bed with electrodes on my chest and an IV in my arm, was to manage the situation without burdening anyone, to process it quietly, to handle it the way I handled everything, the way I had been told, implicitly and repeatedly and with great affection, that I was supposed to. Marcus called that evening. He was the one colleague I'd told after declining the ambulance ride initially. I'd actually tried to decline the ambulance ride, which the paramedic had handled, by simply not acknowledging my refusal as a viable option. You're an idiot, Marcus said by way of greeting. I know. Why didn't you say something? You've been having chest pain for 2 months, and you told nobody. I didn't have a good answer, not one I could give quickly, so I said, I didn't want to make a thing of it. Silence on his end. Ethan, he said, it was a cardiac event, it's already a thing. I know that. I didn't finish the sentence, even in my own head. I called my parents, on the morning of the second day. My mother answered on the second ring. I told her I was in the hospital, that I'd had a cardiac episode, that I was stable and the doctors were managing it well. I used those exact words. Stable, managing, well. The vocabulary of someone trying to minimize what they're reporting while technically reporting it. She made a sound I hadn't heard from her in a long time. Hi, startled, the sound of someone whose breath has been taken without warning. Why didn't you call us? She said. I didn't want to worry you. A silence. Ethan, her voice had changed, thinned. Why didn't you call us? I didn't repeat myself. I just told her the room number. They arrived 2 hours later. My father first through the door, slightly ahead of my mother, the way he moved when he was anxious, fast, with the energy of a man who wants to do something and hasn't figured out what yet. He looked at me in the bed, and something happened in his face that I didn't have a word for. Then my mother was beside him, and she put her hand over her mouth and stood there for a moment before she came to sit at the edge of my bed. You look fine, my father said. He meant it as relief. It came out slightly wrong. I'm going to be fine, I said. The condition is manageable. I just need medication and monitoring going forward. What condition? My mother asked. I explained what Dr. Reyes had told me. The congenital heart anomaly, the way it had probably been present my entire life. The fact that earlier detection would have meant earlier management. My father sat down in the chair beside the window. My mother was very still on the edge of the bed. They didn't find it before, my father asked. They didn't look for it before, I said. A silence settled over the room. Not the comfortable silence of people who know each other well. The other kind. You had chest pain when you were young, my mother said quietly. Not a question, a memory arriving. Once or twice, I said, the same thing I'd told Dr. Reyes. It went away. She closed her eyes. I watched my mother sitting at the edge of my hospital bed with her eyes closed, and I thought about something I had not thought about in years. A dinner table, a Tuesday evening, pain in my chest that I had mentioned once, and then absorbed back into myself when the room's attention moved elsewhere. I had not blamed her for that, not consciously. I had classified it the way I classified most things. Something that had happened, something I had handled, evidence of the capability I'd been told I had. But sitting in this room, with the cardiac monitor making its patient sound beside me, I understood for the first time that handling it hadn't been a choice. Not really. It had been the only option available to me, because the alternative, asking for more than my portion of attention, insisting that my pain was also real, had never quite felt like something I was allowed to do. The lucky ones don't insist. Noah arrived that evening. He'd driven 3 hours from where he lived now, which I hadn't expected. He came through the door slightly breathless, still in the jacket he'd clearly left the house in without changing, and he stopped when he saw me and did something that surprised me. He crossed the room fast and put his arms around me, the way you hug someone when you've frightened yourself getting to them. "You scared me," he said into my shoulder. "I scared myself," I said. He pulled back and looked at me. His eyes were red at the edges. I hadn't seen Noah cry since he was a teenager. He sat in the chair my father had vacated. My parents had gone to find coffee, giving us the room without saying so. And he looked at me with the particular expression of someone who has been driving for 3 hours with something on their mind. "Mom told me what the doctor said," he said. "About it being congenital." "Yeah. She said it should have been found earlier. That's what they think." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his hands. Did you have symptoms before now?" I told him the same thing I'd told everyone. Chest pain, intermittent, easy to explain away. Once as a child, occasionally since. 2 months before the collapse. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was still looking at his hands. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked. To anyone, to me. It was the same question Marcus had asked. The same question my mother had asked from the edge of the bed, with her eyes closed. I had the same answer I always had, which was, I didn't want to make a thing of it, but something shifted in me as I was about to say it again. Some small refusal to repeat the same line one more time in a hospital bed with electrodes on my chest. And what came out instead was something closer to true. "I didn't think I was supposed to," I said. Noah looked up. "What do you mean?" I looked at the window. The afternoon light outside had gone thin and gray, the winter sky doing what it does in Ohio in November. "Growing up," I said carefully, "you were the one who needed things. The appointments, the attention, I stopped, started again. I was the lucky one, the healthy one, the one who could manage." A pause. I think I just absorbed that more than I knew. Noah's face had gone through several expressions while I spoke. I watched them move through without knowing exactly what they were. "Ethan," he said. He stopped. "It's not your fault," I said. "I know that. I know it's not my fault," he said quietly. "But I'm asking, did you ever feel like there wasn't room for you? In the family?" His voice was careful, like someone stepping onto ice, testing it. "Like everything went to me and you just made do." I had never heard anyone in my family name it that directly before. I didn't answer right away. "Sometimes," I said, "I don't know." I told myself it was fine, that I was capable, that not needing things was a kind of strength. "That's not strength," Noah said. He stopped himself. "That's not fair, it wasn't fair." We sat with that for a moment. "I didn't know," he said. "I mean, I knew I got more. Mom and Dad were always more worried about me. I knew that. But I didn't know you were. I didn't know about the chest pain. I didn't know you were ignoring things." He looked at me directly. "I didn't know you'd learn to ignore yourself." The monitor beside me made its steady sound. I thought about all the years I'd watched Noah receive attention, resources, patience, concern, without ever consciously resenting it. Because I'd been told the distribution was fair. Because I'd been told I was fine, capable, lucky. Because I'd believed it. And I thought about an 11-year-old boy who'd felt something wrong in his chest and mentioned it once at dinner, and then let it go because the room had somewhere else to be. I think I need to talk to Mom and Dad, I said. Noah nodded. I'll go get them, he said. My parents came back into the room and sat where they'd been before. My mother at the edge of the bed, my father in the chair by the window. Noah stood near the door, a little back, giving us the space while staying. I hadn't planned what I was going to say. I'd spent 35 years being the person who prepared for difficult conversations so thoroughly that they never felt difficult. I didn't want to do that this time. I wanted to just say the thing, without managing it. I need you to know something, I said. And I need you to hear it without defending yourselves. Not right now. My father's jaw tightened slightly. My mother folded her hands in her lap. I grew up believing I wasn't allowed to need things, I said. Not because you told me that directly, but because of what I was taught over and over in small ways, that my job was to be capable, to not add to the weight, to be the lucky one who could handle whatever wasn't being handled. I paused. I believed that. I built my whole sense of myself around it. No one spoke. I had chest pain when I was 11 years old, I said. I mentioned it at dinner. Nothing happened. The conversation moved on and I let it go because I'd already learned that my needs were the kind that could wait. I looked at my mother. I'm not saying you heard me and decided not to care. I don't think that's what happened. But I am saying that something had already taught me, by the time I was 11, that mentioning it once was enough, that if it didn't get addressed, I should let it go. My mother's eyes had filled. She was not crying yet, but the effort of not crying was visible. I need you to understand what that costs, I said. Not just medically. I mean, just in terms of how a person lives. When you grow up believing your pain is the manageable kind, you get very good at managing it. You get so good that you stop being able to tell the difference between pain that's actually manageable and pain that someone should have looked at 25 years ago. Silence. My father was looking at his hands now. Both of them. I'm not saying this to make you feel guilty, I said, which wasn't entirely true but was partly true. I'm saying it because I need you to understand why I didn't call you for 24 hours when I was lying in a hospital bed. Because my first instinct, my completely automatic, unthought instinct, was not to burden you. A long, still silence filled the room. My mother spoke first. Her voice was barely above a whisper. We kept telling ourselves you didn't need us, she said. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at something in the middle distance, some interior landscape I couldn't see. Every time there was a choice between what you needed and what Noah needed, we told ourselves you were fine, that you were strong, that you'd understand. A pause, the words coming slowly like something being unearthed. We said it so many times. We kept saying you didn't need us, and I think... Her voice broke slightly. She steadied it. I think we said it until we believed it. The cardiac monitor filled the silence. Nobody moved. Outside the window, the Ohio sky had gone fully dark. Recovery, it turns out, is not a single event. I had expected it to feel more defined than it did. A moment of clarity, perhaps. A conversation that resolved things. The kind of emotional watershed that stories tend to organize themselves around because it's easier to understand transformation when it arrives in a recognizable shape. What actually happened was smaller than that, and slower, and in some ways more difficult. I went home from the hospital with a prescription, a follow-up appointment, and a printed sheet of lifestyle guidelines that I read twice and filed in a folder I labeled, with some private irony, things I'm actually dealing with now. I started the medication. I went back to work 3 weeks later, part-time at first, and the conference room where I'd collapsed felt exactly like a conference room. I started seeing a therapist in January. Her name was Dr. Acaffer, and she had a small office near the university with a plant in the corner that looked like it had survived considerable neglect and was quietly thriving anyway, which I chose to take as a good sign. I didn't go because I had a breakdown or a crisis. I went because I was lying in bed one evening about 2 weeks after I'd come home from the hospital, doing the thing I always did before sleep, running through the next day's tasks, organizing, preparing, and I caught myself doing it and thought, I have a heart condition that went undetected for 35 years because I was too well trained to ask for help. Maybe I should talk to someone. It was the most practical decision I'd ever made about my own emotional life. The early sessions with Dr. Ackefer were strange in the way that most honest conversations are strange when you're not used to having them. She asked me once in our third session what I wanted. Not what I needed to do, not what the situation required, what I wanted. I sat with the question for an uncomfortable amount of time. I don't know, I said finally. I'm not sure I've thought about it that way. What way? Like it's a category, I said. What I want, separate from what's reasonable or what's available or what other people. I stopped. I think I usually skip directly to what's practical. She nodded. She didn't look surprised. What would you want? She said carefully. If practical wasn't the filter. I looked at the plant in the corner. It had 3 new leaves that hadn't been there the week before. To not feel like I'm taking up more than my share, I said. Just to not feel that constantly. She wrote something in her notebook. That sounds exhausting, she said. It is, I said. It was the first time I'd admitted that to anyone, including myself. My parents called more that winter than they had in any previous year I could remember. Not dramatic calls, not the kind loaded with apology or reckoning. Mostly shorter calls, more frequent. My mother asking how I was sleeping, whether the medication was settling, whether I'd eaten something real that day. My father texting links to articles about cardiac health that I hadn't asked for and didn't need but kept anyway. It was the version of caring they were capable of at first. Not perfect, not fully transformed, but different from before in a way that I could feel, the way you feel a change in air pressure, not visible but present. In March, my mother drove up to Columbus for the weekend. We didn't have a plan. We walked around the neighborhood near my apartment and ate at a place I liked and talked, mostly about ordinary things. Her garden, a book she'd been reading, a neighbor's new dog that had been causing problems. On Sunday morning, over coffee at my kitchen table, she said, I've been thinking about what you said, in the hospital. I didn't say anything. I waited. I've been trying to think about when it started, she said. When we started treating you differently, and I can't find a single moment. It wasn't, she paused. It wasn't a decision. It was more like a current. We went with it because it felt like the path of least resistance and we told ourselves you were fine, and then we kept telling ourselves that until it became a way of seeing you. She wrapped both hands around her mug. I don't think that's a good enough explanation, but it's the true one. I know, I said. You deserved more, she said. Then we gave you. I need you to know that I know that. I looked at my mother across my kitchen table. A woman I loved, who had loved me, who had also failed me in a way so gradual and so thoroughly rationalized that she'd barely seen it happening. And I felt something that was not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but was something in its direction, a softening, a willingness to remain in the room with the complexity of it. I know you know, I said. That matters. She nodded. She looked down at her coffee. I'm going to keep showing up differently, she said. I don't know if I'll always get it right, but I'm going to try. That's all I'm asking, I said. Noah was the quieter change, and in some ways the more significant one. We talked more that year than we had in maybe a decade. Not about the hospital, after the first few conversations, but just in the way that people talk when they've decided the relationship is worth the attention. He asked about my work, remembered details I'd mentioned and followed up on them, texted sometimes for no reason other than something had reminded him of me. He also, I noticed, stopped calling our parents for help with things he could handle himself. He didn't announce this. He didn't frame it as a decision. It simply became apparent over time. The calls I heard about secondhand became less frequent. The low-level dependence that had structured his relationship with them for 30 years began, slowly, to restructure. Once, over the phone, I mentioned noticing it. I've been thinking, he said, about the fact that I was raised to believe I needed more than I actually did. A pause. And what that cost you? Another pause. I'm trying to figure out who I am when I'm not being handled. It was a more honest sentence than I would have expected from him 2 years earlier. How's it going? I asked. Uncomfortable, he said. But fine. Actually fine, not managed fine. I understood the distinction completely. I met Claire in the spring, 14 months after the collapse. I want to be honest about something. I was not, by the time I met her, a fully healed person. I don't think the story I'm telling ends with that. I was a person in the process of learning to be different, learning to say when something was wrong, to ask for things without a four-step internal justification first, to accept help without cataloging the inconvenience it caused the helper. I was, in Dr. Akeffer's phrase, a work in progress who had finally decided the work was worth doing. Claire was a landscape architect with a dry sense of humor and strong opinions about coffee, and the habit of asking direct questions without softening them first, which initially startled me, and then became one of the things I loved most about her. On our third date, she asked why I seemed to deliberate so much before asking for things, small things, like whether I could have a bite of her food, or whether she minded if we took a different route. I had a practiced answer ready, something self-deprecating and easy to move past. I didn't use it. I grew up believing my preferences were less important than other people's, I said instead. I'm working on it. She looked at me for a moment, not with pity, with the particular attention of someone who has understood something and is deciding what to do with it. Okay, she said. I'll tell you when you're being weird about it. I'd appreciate that, I said. She did tell me, regularly in the first year, and then less often as the habit loosened, and then occasionally, offered lightly, more as a reminder than a correction. I learned, slowly, to want things out loud, to say I'm tired before I was exhausted, to say this isn't working for me before I'd already arranged my life around the problem. It was harder than it sounds. It was also the most useful thing I'd ever learned. Our daughter was born on a Thursday in October. We named her Nora. She arrived 6 days early and spent the first 3 weeks of her life being certain about what she wanted and extremely clear about communicating it, which struck me as an excellent personality trait that I intended to encourage rather than sand down. I was 38 by then. My heart condition was monitored and managed, the medication doing what it was supposed to do, the quarterly checkups finding nothing alarming. Dr. Reyes had said at my last appointment that I was doing well, and she'd see me in 6 months. I was doing well, not in the managed way, in the actual way. Nora was about 4 months old when it happened. I was working from home, a quarterly report due by end of day, the kind of dense, detail-heavy work that requires sustained focus. She'd been settled for almost 2 hours, which was unusual, and which I'd taken, gratefully, as a window to get things done. She started crying from the other room. Not the sharp, urgent cry of something wrong. The fussing cry, the I'm bored and I've decided this, is your problem now cry, which I had learned to distinguish from the others over 4 months of close attention. My hands were on the keyboard. I had 3 sections left. The deadline was in 2 hours. I sat there for approximately 4 seconds. Then I saved the document, pushed back from the desk, and went to get her. She was lying in her crib, looking at the ceiling with the particular expression of a person who has been waiting longer than is acceptable. When I appeared above her, she stopped crying immediately, which I had also learned meant she'd been bored rather than distressed. I picked her up. She grabbed my collar with one fist the way she always did. I stood there in the small room we'd painted a soft yellow, holding my daughter, and I thought about what I wanted her to grow up believing about herself. Not that she was strong. Not that she was the easy one, the capable one, the one who could manage. Not that her needs were the kind that could wait, the kind that were reasonable to defer, the kind that went away if you left them long enough. I wanted her to grow up knowing, in her body, not just her mind, the way you know things that have never been questioned, that wanting something was allowed, that hurting was allowed, that needing was allowed, that she didn't have to be lucky to deserve care. She looked up at me with the complete, uncomplicated attention that babies have before they learn to read the room. Hi, I said. She grabbed my collar tighter. I thought about my parents, who had loved me in the way they knew how, who had also, without meaning to, taught me that my portion was smaller than everyone else's, who were trying now to love me differently, imperfectly, incrementally, but genuinely trying. I thought about Dr. Akeffer's question in that third session. What do you want? Not what's practical. I thought about learning, at 35, to answer that question without flinching. Nora made a sound that meant she was satisfied for now, but reserved the right to have further opinions. I held her and looked out the yellow room's window at the October afternoon. The same season I always associated with hospitals and ceilings, and being sick in ways nobody noticed. And I felt something clean move through me. The report would get done. It always got done. That had never been the question. Nobody in this house, I said quietly to the small person holding my collar, has to earn being loved. She didn't understand me yet, but I meant it for both of